Well, in the last year, there's been a number of big news stories, and Reddit is always sort of, news has been a part of Reddit for some time now. But it seems like in the last year, there's been three sort of major stories, at least to me, that stuck out as sort of examples of Reddit and the role of citizen journalism in. One being the movie theater shooting in Aurora, Colorado. The other being the bombing at the Boston Marathon, and more recently the shooting at the Navy Yard in Washington, D.C. And those three events to me are interesting because it seems like they kind of, I mean, there's three, so that helps them line up very easily in my mind, but they kind of represent different things. Because the Aurora one, I just remember when that happened, it was because it was sort of late. It was late here, so
Right.
obviously news outlets were trying to scramble to figure out what was happening. And in that case, there was a lot of sort of what we would call first-person reporting that was taking place from Redditors. In fact, I think there was a Redditor who was actually at the theater who was injured during the shooting. And with the Boston Marathon bombing, it was a different situation. There was people who were reporting things that were taking place in Boston, but there was also a lot of spread of the information that was circulating in other places, and eventually misinformation. And the misidentification of a student from Brown University as one of the suspects in the bombing. And in that case, I'm wondering how those two incidents are different, because with the Navy Yard shooting, very quickly someone created a subreddit about trying to sort of investigate what was happening, and you guys decided to shut that one down. And so I'm wondering maybe what you have learned over these incidents about how people are trying to report these stories and sort of what role Reddit has to play.
Well, first, I mean, I think those three situations, just in general, the response was exactly the same in the community. It's the same thing that you would see offline. People were trying to figure out what was going on. They were telling their story if they were somehow involved, or they used to live in the area, so they were sort of explaining, okay, this neighborhood's next to that neighborhood, and I know that movie theater, I used to work there, whatever. They were making jokes, they were trying to sort of make light of a very serious situation, and they were, speculating about all kinds of things, and they were, trying to make sense of what was happening. And then later on, they were trying to sort of help in some way. I think, with Boston, it was a little different because the authorities came and wanted help from the public. So they said, hey, if you have footage, if you have photos, upload them, share them, send them to this email address. And sort of that is what, the biggest threads on Reddit related to any sort of suspects or finding people was sharing that hotline email from the FBI. There was another subreddit that was created, and where people were trying to identify the bombers, and they were kind of showing pictures from different angles, and they were speculating wildly and circling individuals in crowd photos, and that subreddit got a lot of attention. Now, the actual subreddit where this Brown student that you mentioned was, unfortunately, his name was posted. That was actually the Boston subreddit. So this name was posted not in this sort of incendiary, controversial subreddit. It was posted in the normal Boston subreddit where people talk about whatever, all kinds of stuff. And it was removed. But it was removed, I think, after about an hour. And in that particular situation, that wasn't good enough, right? It had been up there for an hour. People tweeted it. People saw it. The moderators in that subreddit did what they're supposed to do and what our rules require them to do, but it was too slow with all these people watching, with this huge national crisis. And that led to people being misidentified. That led to some really horrible consequences for that family. So, I don't know. The idea of what did we learn? One, we learned that people, that people sort of want to share, they want to talk, they want to, help, they want to be a part of these, huge events in any way they can. We learned that, people can be sort of callous and cavalier when they're mentioning someone else's name. Most people, the vast majority of people weren't. The vast majority of people on Reddit and elsewhere on the internet were very careful and very thoughtful with spreading information, but enough people were sort of careless in spreading information and retweeting things and upvoting things and reposting things that actual damage was done. And so that's, I don't know if that's something we learned, but it's definitely something we witnessed. The incident in the Navy Yard, I think, it's sort of not like the other two situations. That subreddit was actually, I think...
Was it a joke?
It was a joke, one. That subreddit had 5 posts in it and like 6 comments, and half of those were actually from journalists who were sort of in on the joke, and it was sort of satirizing what had happened on Reddit in the Boston bombing. And that subreddit maybe got 1,000 views before we shut it down, because it was sort of purposely going against our policies in the sidebar. So we shut it down after like an hour when it first came to our attention. And then like 100 stories were written about like, oh, we've learned our lesson. It's like, okay, well.
But at the same time, you issued an apology after the Boston situation.
Absolutely. I mean, look, I think the circumstances and what happened on our end with Boston are much more complicated than just like, oh, we made this decision correctly or incorrectly. But we've always sort of issued more of a follow-up, of a postmortem. Like, we do it when our servers crash. We do it when something awesome happens on the site. When President Obama came on, we did a follow-up and said, this is the traffic we got. This is why our site broke during part of it. This is, et cetera. And so in this, sort of big important incident, we not only, yes, we apologized. I apologized. We talked about what could be done better, both by ourselves and sort of the community and the users on the internet at large. But we also talked about all the amazing things. We talked about people sending pizza to the police stations and the EMS stations. We talked about people in Boston, brought their pets out to one of the parks in case people needed a little bit of cute animal therapy. So we talked about all of those things. But yes, absolutely apologized, and we could have done better. Like we could have done better. That's the bottom line, and that's something we've always, we're an open source site code-wise, and we try to be open source sort of policy and management-wise as well. And so we will always sort of follow up anything big with, this is what happened from our perspective.